Hey, it's Joe Farrow, Geek Toolkit. Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be more of a work in progress episode where I want to talk about a number of projects I've been working on to give you updates on where they're at. Now, normally what I would do is I would finish the project, then I'd go film this big episode, and I do all the editing and I release it, but I get about 1 or 2 videos a month out that way. What I've decided to do is give you more work in progress updates so I can get feedback from the community of what you're excited about, what you want to know more about, and then when I make the bigger project videos, I can answer those questions in them. Also, I think this will help me better connect with you and give you more like behind the scenes of what's going on and what it's like in the creative process instead of just being like, hey, look, I did everything, it's done, and, you know, as if I figured it all out at once, because that's really not how it is. And I really have noticed that as I watch behind the scenes, I learn more. And since I'm trying to teach people on my channel or basically share my experience so that they can learn from my wins and failures, then I thought this would be a better way to go. So that's what you're going to get in this episode. I'm going to talk about 3 different projects. One is a 3D printing one. The other one is I'm going to give an update on Dynaframe and where that project's at. I've had a lot of great feedback on that, and I've had a lot of great progress I want to show. And then finally, I'm going to talk about ESPhome and where I'm going with that. The old dynatap project. I'm going to revive that and go somewhere with it. Let's start talking about 3D printing. What am I doing in 3D printing? Well, right now, I'm using a program called Luban. And Luban lets you do stuff like this. Now, this right here is a gnome. This is a garden gnome that I'm working on. It's primed. It needs a bit more sanding right now. But it is, let's see, 16 inches tall. That's 400 millimeters. And this was printed on an Ender 3 Pro unmodified. So the question is, how do you print that big on a printer that only goes up to 240 millimeters? How do you print 400 millimeters? Well, Luban is the magic there. And what Luban is software from a gentleman named Lushi Shen. And what he's been able to do is, well, okay, so let me start out by saying Luban does a ton of things. But in this regard, the thing that I'm focusing on is where it can split a mesh for you and allow you to print each piece of the mesh. And not only does it split it, but it actually puts either dowels. You can have dowels that connect things together, or you can print little like knobs on the end of each piece so that you can reassemble it, glue it, and it will actually line up. It's incredibly powerful in that way. It also allows you to do some splits so that, for instance, on this one here, I actually printed his arm here with the hammer separately on a totally separate printer that only does 180 millimeters. It was a Cetus 3D. And what happened is when I was printing him, his arm had come off. And so with Luban, I was able to split the arm off and print just that piece and then reassemble it and glue it back on, which I thought was really handy, really cool. So yeah, this is a garden gnome. I'm really excited about this. And I printed one at the normal resolution, normal height of 200 millimeters, just in general to practice with. And that one I let my daughter paint. So that one's actually in my backyard right now. These are all printed in PLA. And one of the things that people have been asking is, well, if you put PLA in a yard, doesn't it get wrecked? Well, there's a number of things here. One is these are all primed pieces of PLA. I'm not putting raw PLA out there. Another thing is I live in the Pacific Northwest, and really about 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit is our top temperature. PLA typically will start to really break down to 111 degrees Fahrenheit. I know Las Vegas right now is 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, you definitely probably don't want it out in the sun and pure temperatures. But for me, I'm actually putting it in a shaded area and I'm priming it so it gets some UV protection. I'm not depending on the PLA color to actually come through because PLA will bleach out. And I've actually had I had a fairy that I printed at 2 feet tall. It's actually a Tinkerbell statue. That model has been outside for, let's see, since December. So about 6 months now. It's been through snow and quite a bit of rain out here. And it's been absolutely fine. The only problem I've had with that is my daughter likes to pick it up, play with it, put it down a slide, and broke the head off. So a little bit of super glue got that back on. But really, that has been like a little stone statue out there that has been great. Now, I didn't really do the best job of putting that together, and I'll talk about that when I make my Luban episode. I'll talk about the tips and tricks of printing, using bigger nozzle sizes, infill, and so on. But for now, I just wanted to show that it's really possible to print some really impressive large things with that software, amongst a million other things like lithophanes. Some other quick things I do with 3D printing is I printed, I've really been into gardening and planting. I saw these really cool little flower pots that are themed after Super Mario Brothers. Now this one kind of got me because it said it was printing with no supports. Now this is a fairly large print, a lot of filament, and I didn't want to try it with no supports right off the bat. So what I did is I scaled it down to a fourth of its size. So this is the same thing, just scaled way down here. And you can see there. But what it did is I was able to print it without supports in about 13 minutes and test to make sure it was going to be an okay print. And it's just a great prototyping trick if you're worried about supports on something. Scale it down and get a bit of a feel. Now, it's not 100% accurate, but for me, knowing if the question mark was going to print out clearly, I immediately knew, seeing how this came out, that there was 45-degree, basically, portions on the bottom of this, and that's how he pulled off making the question marks printable as a detail that came out without actually needing supports. Very clever stuff. So let's talk about Dynaframe for a minute. Dynaframe, I've been putting a lot of work into, and I've had some really important requests that I wanted to address. One of the requests was to talk about EXIF data. Now, EXIF data is an embedding of data for things like title and names and so on that actually get embedded into a JPEG. The nice thing about this is if you embed it in there, it travels with the file. So it doesn't matter where you copy the file to, it's there, it's a metadata, it's in the file. The other thing about this is it's standard. There's a lot of apps that will help you edit these files or edit these names, and then you can do things like tag the file and so on. Now, Dynaframe has used this traditionally a folder structure, which is really cool, but here's where it breaks down. I'll give you an example. Say I have Marvel pictures, and I've got like all of my stuff that's Marvel related there, and then I have a movie poster folder, and I've got some stuff there. If I have a, say like a Black Widow movie poster for the movie that's coming out, which I'm really excited about, that movie poster, do I put it in the Marvel folder? Do I put it in the other folder? Do I put it in both? Right? So that's where things start breaking out. Now, what if I want to have a superheroes poster, or if I want to have good guys, bad guys poster or whatever, right? Like there's this thing where the entire folder structure breaks down and you can't really do cross-folder stuff. Now, this is where EXIF data comes in and it gets really interesting. With EXIF data, I can mark up that picture with all of the tags, and then we can do a playlist based on tags. And that's basically what I've done here, is I've added the ability to, you can add folders and then add tags that you're interested in across those folders, and it will filter it down. The downside for this is, of course, it doesn't work for videos, and it doesn't work for PNGs at this point. I'm looking into that, and that's why I haven't really finished this out. Now, some other features I've done is I fixed some annoying bugs like the reboot bug that was there. And my really biggest feature that I'm super proud of, because I had to learn a programming language, or basically a framework called Skia, is I've done what's called blur boxing. Blur boxing is going to be a game changer for Dynaframe. If you've had to actually edit your photos to be fit into your frames so that they look good, and you've been cropping stuff or like trying to build out a photo, you'll no longer have to worry about that with blur boxing. Blur boxing will blur the photo behind it and will make it just look really good and fill up any frame. And this works really well if the picture's too narrow, too tall. It works horizontally and vertically. I've even had pictures scroll across here and they look great. So blur boxing was a great feature I'm really excited about, along with the EXIF tag data. Now, if you look at the 2.23 build of Dynaframe, you can start to play with this stuff, but you'll notice a couple things. One is the load times are brutal, and they're brutal right now because I'm loading up all of the EXIF data for every image. The next portion of this is I'm working on making a SQLite database so that all of the image EXIF data goes into a database, and then I can do very quick filtering, fix my load times, and so on. I really want to thank Quicksilver for his basically just tenacious help with me on this as we work through features and talk about different things and toss ideas back and forth. The other thing that I'm going to have to do on Dynaframe is I'm going to have to rework the entire syncing system, and that is a work in progress right now, but that is another feature that I'll have to do before I finally call my next release final. But that's all being worked on for Dynaframe. The final thing I want to talk about is this dynatap project, which is the NFC wireless basically sender that I built. Now, since I did that, ESPhome has been taken over. Well, ESPhome has been acquired by Home Assistant, which is great. And the other thing is there's other NFC designs that have come out. I really, really liked this project, and I really like the ability to have NFC. But since NFC is now built into Home Assistant, and ESPhome is going to be a first-class citizen, it only makes sense for me to port this to ESPhome. As part of my home automation series, though, I want to actually do a tutorial on what ESPhome is, how to set it up, and so on. So that's where I'm going to go with this. Is you'll probably see two videos come out. One is an introduction to ESPhome, what it is, how to get it going on these chips. And also, as I do that, I'll dive into a little bit about what an ESP chip is, what Expressive is, the ESP01, and a little bit of that history, right? Because I want to give that to you. I don't want to just say, this is how to do something. And then the second part will be the NFC features of this, where I can tie it into things like my arcade cabinet and so on. I do have an update to my pedestal arcade. I will probably talk about that in the future, but that's a bit lower down the line right now. Basically, I went with the AT Games system, their pedestal system, and I'm happy with it. It's basically a Steam arcade setup right now, and honestly, that's been really good. I'm really happy with that. It's been really simple. I also am I've switched over from the front end I had on there to big box, and I do like big box, but a lot of my videos that you've been watching where I talk about all these like amazing features like facial recognition to change your game list, that is not easy to do in big box as it is today. So there's some programming there that I'll work on, but again, that's a bit down the line. All right, so that's my basically project lineup for the next probably month or two. And I'll give you some more updates of this on my Instagram. I'll put my Instagram in the description to show you what the gnomes, you can see the gnomes that have been painted and what they looked like as they were getting built up, but also to show you what this next couple I'm printing out. I'm working on the sword gnome right now. I've also got the spear gnome that I've got to print. The axe gnome is out in the garden right now that my daughter printed alongside with Tinkerbell. And then this is the mace gnome, which is really clever because it's a little meat cleaver. The files from Zandorio for these gnomes are available on cults3d.com. I'll put a link in the description. He's been incredibly friendly. Basically the files, the way they come with the STLs, the way they've got it set up is really easy to print. And he comes up with PNGs that he releases that shows you what his paintings look like. And I really appreciate that because it gives you some painting ideas of what these things could really look like. I also, when I do this gnome final follow-up, I really want to show how to make these things handle in the weather. So I'm probably going to do like a polyurethane spray on them or something as well. So there's a little bit of like having 3D prints outdoors and protecting them that I want to talk about. All right, that's all I have for this episode. Let me know what you think of these videos, these work in progress. If these are nice, I can do more of these. And I think it just helps me better engage with the community. Also, to give you some ideas of where I'm going. And also, if you get excited about Luban, you can run off on your own and study it and learn it. It's really, really fun. There's a ton of lithophane stuff you can do with it. And also laser cutting stuff we do with it. It's a very amazing software. So thanks for watching. I'm Joe Farrow with Geek Toolkit. Until next time.